please welcome Mike Glover. Listen, this guy is not only ex-CIA, Special Forces, survivalist, outdoor man, but he is the CEO and owner of Fieldcraft Survival. He is also the podcast host of Mike Force, which I found out the name about that today on Cleared Hot. So that makes a little more sense now. And you also are, I want to say, an author as well. Am I wrong on this?
Yeah, well, I'm writing a book right now for a big publisher. So it'll be out next year.
Okay, fantastic. So this is Mike. Welcome, Mike, to the show.
Pleasure and honor. Thanks for having me.
No worries, man. I learned so much about you through so many of your friends because I'm creepy like that. And I try to look at everything from a fairly open and honest perspective. And I think that's what you do, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's the only way to be. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you do me a favor? And like I said, I've heard you say this as well, but this is part of the deal. When you talk to people of your caliber, you kind of got to regurgitate a little, just a tiny bit. Can you give me and our listeners a quick, tiny rundown of exactly who you are? Because I feel like I'm going to butcher it.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in, a military household. My dad was in the Army. He met my mom in Korea, where he was stationed at. And so I grew up with a military mindset from a dad and from a granddad and from a long line of service. And then I already knew from a young age, probably about 10, that I was going to join the military, and served really my entire life, as long as I could remember, in the Army. So I joined when I was 17, did 4 years in the infantry, which is combat arms, and infantryman is the actual position. And then try to do everything I could do school-wise and education-wise. And then right after 9/11, I went to Special Forces selection, and then spent the remainder of my career in special operations. So traditionally, people would recognize the Army's branch of special operations as the Green Berets, but we do have U.S. Army Rangers, Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the list goes on. So I did that in an entire career, had a lot of combat deployments, a lot of epic adventures, was a sniper, was a joint terminal air controller, traveled all around the world and fulfilled my dream. At the end of that, I decided, hey, I got to transition at some point. And so I got my college degree and my bachelor's degree in Homeland Security, and then had my sights set on the CIA in a full-time capacity. I wanted to be with Mike Spann in the CIA, because he was one of the first casualties of the war, but not a lot was known about the Central Intelligence Agency. I transitioned as a contractor, loved and enjoyed that position, did that for about 2.5, 3 years. And then I decided to step away because I wasn't fulfilled. To be honest, the reason I stepped away is because there wasn't a war. There wasn't a fight left. If there was a war right now, if we were fighting ISIS, if we were fighting Al-Qaeda, if we were fighting anybody, I would be still in the military or still in the CIA. But there was no war going on, and I decided to step away and start my own company called Fieldcraft Survival. I was in Pakistan in a shipping container similar to where you're at, and it was built out like a house, and I started the homework to build my company.
That's brilliant, man. I love that you have this. It sounds like this innate drive from an early on. You never really had to be taught. It seems like that just kind of came from a family lineage, and that's a fantastic thing. And it shows obviously in the not only longevity of your career, but it also shows in the intensity of your career. If I'm not mistaken, I mean, you're not like me, who's like, I want to be a soldier. You're like, I want to do everything and then be non-existent all at the same time while cutting your throat without even knowing I'm there. That's what you wanted to do. And I'm just like, all I can do is marvel in the sheer longevity of a career like that, because I understand the severity of the events that you've been in too, as much as I can understand. And to know that you've been able to come out of them the way you have, and then not only transition into civilian life in what seems like a very successful way. And not to throw shade, but I mean, you are a Green Beret, and how many Green Beret books are there? Not as many as SEALs. So yeah. I mean, I feel like you didn't quite start writing your book when you became a Ranger. unlike other people, but we started, and that's okay, and that's fantastic. Are you allowed to say who the publisher is?
Yeah, I can. It was released in a press release, so I could say it.
Okay.
It's Penguin Random.
I knew it. It was either them or going to be Simon Schuster. I could have guaranteed that.
Yeah.
I know.
I was actually, after I heard Jack Carr was Simon and Schuster, I was like, ooh, maybe those are the guys. But I'm not writing
Yeah.
fiction, and so I didn't have to do all the hard legwork that fiction would entail. I just had to propose, a basic outline,
Yeah.
and they were on board, and I'm super excited about it.
That's good. You sound like me. It's like, this is my life. Like it? And they're like, yep. And you're like, awesome.
Yeah, thank God.
You have to do what Jack Carr does. I know. I want to have him on because I want to talk to him a little bit about the way that writing process went. I'm not a writer, so I'm learning about all that. That's a whole other thing, man.
He would love to come on your show. He would love to.
Oh, well, you're gonna have to hook me up because he's a hard one to reach, my friend.
Him.
You're gonna fucking text him, of course you are, because you're one of those guys. God damn it, fuck. Andy. Yeah, you told me he was cool, but I didn't know he was this cool. God. So let's talk about a lot of things, because I'm not gonna lie to you. So there's a couple questions I have for you right off the bat, and they're gonna be fairly sporadic spaced. Number one, didn't know you could study Homeland Security. What? That's a major? Where did you go to university for that? And like, what type of program, and what does that normally job afterward look like?
Yeah, so I started my career at a very young age and knew that I had a transition point. So I was 17, thinking about 20 years down the road. And so I knew to be in federal service, like the FBI, HRT, the CIA in a full-time position, you had to have your bachelor's degree. So I nickel and dime my degree. It took me actually 15 years to get my degree. But in between combat rotations, like literally in between combat, like I'd go out for the night, everybody would come back and go to sleep, and I'd come back and work on college. And so I started my undergraduate degree in criminal justice because I was like, oh, FBI, HRT, CIA, that's a thing. But after I got my associates and really almost my core curriculum in undergraduate in criminal justice, I realized that crisis response, which at the federal level was tethered in Homeland Security, and it was available. And I was like, man, this is what I do for a living in counterterrorism.
Right.
Easy transition for me. And it became more of a popular thing. I started out at Troy University in South Carolina, and then migrated to American Military University, which is designed for military guys like me. And then got my bachelor's degree in Homeland Security with an emphasis in crisis response, and also a second bachelor's degree in criminal justice. So
Jesus. So you're like, again, let me hit it off the park. Just being Asian and successful isn't good enough. Let's just go harder.
You got to go hard in the paint. You got to commit.
Speaking of hard in the paint, apparently you and I have a mutual friend named Brian Bishop.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did Andy tell you about that?
No, him and I talk, and he goes, who you having on the show this week? And I'm like, Mike Glover. And he's like, fuck you, tell the guy to answer his DMs. And I was like, I will, but he's a big deal, Bishop, and you're not. So, and he didn't like that. So it's fine. It's perfectly fine. He watched me whimper like a little bitch during ayahuasca. So it's fine. We have that relationship.
Awesome. That's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's definitely something. Okay. So when you talk about your education and things like that, and you're like, listen, I knew when I was 17, I was going to have an entry and exit out of the military and what it was going to look like. Do you think that was because you wanted to go into the military so young that you were, I don't say bred into this, but you kind of understood the succession and how that works?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think at a young age, if you're taught to create a vision or an objective or a goal, and you start thinking about that, and look, I'm an only child, so maybe part of it is that I had a very good, and I still do, a imagination. I have the ability to take an idea of something that I want or desire, and then backwards plan off of that. As a kid, I didn't understand the process, meaning I didn't understand the structure that was in line. So I think I had the idea, and then when I got in the military, they gave me the technical ability to make that idea reality. So I'm a big planner, right? So I take military
Mhm.
decision-making processes, 5-paragraph operations orders from Rangers and SF. And then I just plug that in like I did my business plan. And now I can strategically, I can create like if you told me, hey, here's the goal, how do we get there? My
Right.
brain, because it's constructed that way, can develop the way to navigate it.
Right. And that's why you have like Fieldcraft now. I mean, because like
Yes.
I know I'm jumping all over, but I think it's important because you know, people listen to this in chunks and I think one thing that I really find fascinating about your transition period and getting out of the military is the sheer success that it has been. Because you and I both know most people who get out, it's a very it's a fickle, it can be an issue. And especially if you've been in that long. Like there's this idea that this you are one person, this is who you are now, this is how you function. Like Andy said, I'm not a Navy SEAL. I was a Navy SEAL. I am now a gay porn star, but that's a different thing.
Yeah.
So,
Side hustle.
side hustle, you got to have a side hustle. And so when you decided that you were going to get out and you decided this is what you want to look at, when you got out, was this something you wanted to do? Did you want to do fieldsman? Did you want to do some type of way to educate civilian population? Because personally, looking at you, I wouldn't think you would want to deal with the civilian population afterward, just because it's such a drastic contrast.
Yeah, very good question. I started and I was like, I want to be a sniper. My only objective was sniper because I appreciated the craft of being a sniper. Like I
Right.
love being a sniper because people think like being a sniper is shooting a long gun. That's 1/100th of your overall job. You have,
Right. Yes.
we snipers, and I could say this because I am a sniper, or I was a sniper. We used to make fun of all the assaulters because they're like the Mongo smash guys, and we're like
Yes.
reading novels, in
Yeah.
between breaks.
Hulk smash.
Yeah, yeah. So we are very technical, very intelligent, and for the most part, we hone this craft. So in sniper operations, the craft you have to hone to be the best is fieldcraft because it's the application of going outside, doing stalks on the enemy, concealment and cover, all these cool things. And then when I got out, I realized I don't have the transition to create another craft because there's nothing that I'm interested in. So I could have been a tactical instructor. I could teach pistol, carbine, do all that stuff, but that's a dime a dozen for my background for
Right.
teaching civilians. So there was this whole other thing called survival. Most people think survival is being naked and afraid in the woods. They think it's like this thing where you rub sticks and you put a
Naked and
lighter
afraid in the
to a
woods.
lint dryer fuzz.
Yeah.
But it's not that. That's primitive survival. That's like the worst case scenario. This modern survival genre is so interesting to me because it's the culture that I came from. Like the question that I asked was, if special operators can go out every night and intentionally put themselves in the worst case scenario and come out on top, why?
Hmm.
And people think, oh, because the guys are elite. I assure you, me and Andy are not elite. I mean, we're trained, we're funny, we're handsome, but we're not elite. We belong to an elite culture, which is a machine that spit us out when it was all said and done.
He
So
said the same thing. Not to
yeah,
interrupt. He said the same thing because I said, you guys are all elite. You guys are all top tier. You guys are all this. And I said, in the NCOs, there's lots of ship pumps. And he goes, hold on, what the fuck is ship pumps? And I was like, you don't know what a ship pump is? And he's like, no. And I was like, pretty much anybody that sucks at their job in the military and that's going to get you killed. And he's like, adding that to my vocabulary because
ooh,
he's
I
like,
like
we're
that.
not all elite. We're not all these things. Some of us are really good at our job. Some of us really fucking suck at their job. And then it
Yeah,
spits these people out, no matter what. If you can graduate and you can be smart enough, you're deployable.
yes, I like that. He said that. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, we're on the same wavelength.
Yeah, 'cause listen, we were talking very, I'm not trying to make this about him, but we had this conversation and I just said, he goes, what's it? I said, I worked with dudes like you very rarely, but I have. And I know the difference of people like you. And then I know the people I've actually like in the trenches with. it scares the life out of me because I'm going to get shot in the back. Like it, you know it.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
said, we're not all elite. And so when you say careful when you group us in all as one, and I
Mm,
was like, fair. I can respect that. He goes, because not all of us are, we're not. And that's the
yes,
reality.
true. That's true.
Mhm.
Yeah. So when look, what's missing in society right now, and it's probably been missing for a long time, is the identity of positive tribalism, right? Like right now, tribalism is a bad thing, supposedly, right? It's a negative
Yeah.
connotation. But it used to be cool because you used to have your groups and your segments. And now that's being canceled because it seems like it's racist or you're a segregatist or whatever the new verb is. So
But you're Asian.
yeah, it's like you can't. I would naturally gravitate towards my Asian brothers. That's what I do. People do that to me. Like we just start migrating together and doing math
It's
and
like magnets and doing math and shit. It happens,
yeah,
brother. I get
crushing
it.
laundry, man. I'm so good. Look at this shirt. How pressed this thing is. I did that
Bro, I'm
myself.
so proud of you right now. I'm so proud of you. Your skills are so legit right now. This is
I'm
so
trying. I'm
fantastic.
trying. I could have started a laundry business, but it just wasn't in me. The
Wasn't in
margins aren't
you.
great. Yeah, the margins aren't.
Feel you. So you're like
Yeah.
civilian population, they need to learn how to be accountable on some level, but they also need to learn how to handle things safely and come up to a situation and not have this freeze and fight or flight moment. And I've seen you go and do these groups, and I've seen these. This is my favorite when I see like straight up mom looking people, and they're like, I just trained with Mike Glover, and
Yep.
I'm
I
like,
love that.
yes, because there's so much accountability and ownership in your life and your family's life, and it's so nice to see. And so I just want to acknowledge that because I think it's important. I don't know if you see everything that comes out, but these people that you involve yourself with, there's a reason for it, right? They're
Yeah,
coming
I
to you
think.
for a reason.
Well, I like that this genre that's called preparedness is one of few genres in the world now that seems to bring people together, and people can get on board with that. So if you're a
Mhm.
soccer mom from Philly, you're a rancher from Montana, you could sit down and go, hey, I want to be better prepared, just like you. Let's talk, let's communicate, and we have some like-minded interests, and I love that.
Do you find that these groups that you're dealing with are predominantly, the reason I ask this, because I think I know the answer, but I want my listeners to hear this. Do you think that they're predominantly left or right? Or do you think these are just people that are just trying to keep their family safe?
Yeah, the original assumption would be that they are coming from the right, right? But
Hmm.
here's what I from the very onset of this, I said if I could convince a liberal out of San Francisco to come outside of his bubble and go, hey, this is something I'm interested in, then I would be meeting my objective because I don't think look, disaster is an equal opportunist. It will smash you no matter what. It will destroy your
Hmm.
life and turn your world inside out. So if I come to the table and I'm like, I'm just target marketing or target talking to the right, that's not right for me. I mean, it's actually a bad demographic because the right, most often conservatives are more preparedness minded anyway. So
Hmm.
I want to target market centrists, people who are middle America who aren't on the fringe of left or right, on the edges, the outer edges. You could be conservative and still like I'm conservative, but I like weed to go to sleep. I like CBD. So I'm
Right.
not that kind of guy, an extremist. So
Hmm.
I think it's right now after years of doing this, we've gotten our target demographic, which is about 80% of the country, which are considered middle America.
That's fantastic, though, because I think that's important for people to realize. Because I think there's this perception of ex-military people, ex-CIA operatives that we sit there and we shoot guns and we tote an American flag, and I'm Canadian and I still get that shit, so it's comical. So I want people to see it for what it is, because preparedness and readiness and knowing how to protect yourself has nothing to do with what you believe in. It has to do with violence is violence, and violence is horrific if you don't know how to handle yourself in that situation. And there's such a need for what you're doing. I guess my next thing would be, are you ever going to come up to Canada to run these programs?
I have actually a lot of people from Canada who follow us. I've worked with the Canadian, your JTF and your
Yep.
commandos, and I love Canadians, and we have a lot in common, and there's a common bond between us. I like I would love to go there and train. A lot of the complaints that I hear from Canada, obviously, and Jordan Peterson talks about this often, is how these these politicized issues become policy and completely
Right.
destroy the fabric of what makes Canada great, just like what makes America great, which is this
Right.
idea of having the ability and freedoms to live your best life without the suppression of government overreaching into your life. And so they're on board with self-reliance and cutting the umbilical cord from institutions, just like Americans. And I would love it.
That would be great. I think, and you touch on a good point. Like Jordan Peterson he's another guy I'd like to chat with about more of the psychedelics and trauma section. But in in that idea, because I was wondering, I'm asking this question. I'm like, I don't even know if he would want to come up here and teach this, because we have, number one, we're not allowed to shoot anything fucking cool anymore. Number two, to get a gun license and actually have a weaponry of those, like it's a whole other ball game. The overreach is
Mhm.
astronomical, and how quickly they took the rights to have an AR or a C7 or anything like that. They did it overnight without a vote. They're banned without question, without discussion, and that just doesn't fly in the States. And so I'm curious about your viewpoint on that. Just being where you are from, and seeing all the places you've deployed, because you've seen true violence. And I think that the US has a better handle on how to approach preparedness and readiness. And I want to keep on this topic because I think there is such a lack of it when you look at where I live. No one has a clue on how to handle themselves at all in any situation. And it's very obvious. You can see how we're handling COVID. It's pathetic.
Mhm.
So it's this soft mindset. Do you have plans to expand outward with this program and these types of programs from a not just readiness standpoint, but a safety aspect, from a burglary standpoint, from a intrusion standpoint, without weaponry, with only say knives, and only, like, is there other things that are away from the gun subset that you do?
Yeah. So statistically, the likelihood of you getting in a gunfight is like getting hit with lightning. It's very um, not much a thing. So one,
Unless you live in Surrey.
yeah, that's true. Yeah. Like there's places that you could, I mean, there's places in the United States like Chicago, like the neighborhood of Austin, that has more murders in the same time period as the global war on terror in Iraq, and
Gee.
more homicides and people killed than warfare. But look, it's a lot of these things called preparedness don't have anything to do with guns. I mean, let me give you an example. Like
Mhm.
we talk about situational awareness and self-awareness. So one of the proxy benefits of freedom is the fact that we become more complacent as a society. So if you're free and you live in a sovereign nation that has good governance, good laws, and good security, you feel like you're safe. So you let your guard down. And so the things that you normally do in a semi-permissive environment where things are safe, but they often go wrong or bad, you wouldn't do. So we don't think about carrying guns. We don't think about carrying first aid kits. We don't even think about situational awareness. We're driving down the road and spend half the time in our commute on our phone staring at it. And we go, oh, how did we get here? Right. So we're not paying attention. We're not conscious to our world. So the first engagement and talk that I would have with Canadians, just like I would have in a lot of places where their freedoms have been suppressed or oppressed, I would say, look, it starts with yourself. It starts with situational awareness. Are you paying attention to the world around you? And if something goes wrong, do you have a plan? Most often, uh, in the absence of a plan, which is like the absence of a tactic, we make gross assumptions, we formulate opinions, and we do weird shit. Like when you're in a fight or flight state, fight, flight, or freeze state, and you're operating primarily with this norepinephrine, all this adrenaline pumping through your body, cortisol, the stress hormone, you are not operating very cognitively. If you don't have a tactic to transition from that flinch response into a more cognitive response, you are just going to lay in the fetal and suck on your thumb if you're lucky. You might do something like a second floor building's on fire, you run to the third floor and you jump off and land on your head, right? So the idea is preparedness is like that, and it has little to do with specific scenarios and technical expertise of drawing a pistol and defending your life. Like I would say most often, because it's relatable to Canada, like car accidents, 30 to 40,000 people in America die from vehicle accidents. That's a lot of people. It's like 100 people a day die from vehicle accidents. In the last couple of weeks, I've had 7 people in my community die, like literally burning to the ground in vehicle accidents because of people's lack of paying attention. And so the numbers do this, like it just steadily increases. Less attention, more casualties. So another thing that you mentioned about, going to these war zones. Let me mention this about my experience. I was asked once, why would you teach civilians tactics? Like you learned all these classified tactics. Why would you teach them tactics? And I said, okay, you're asking me and you're an American. Let me create some context for you. Why would a Green Beret go to a foreign country that lacks sovereignty, that lacks security, and train not just people that are trained, not just law enforcement, not just border patrol, not just military, but civilians that are assessed and recruited out of villages who don't even have an education, not just they lack literacy, they haven't never been educated in anything in their life besides technical skills. Why would I go there and train them? Why would I give them guns? Why would I give them ammo? Why would I give them training and then make them fight for their own country? Well, the simple answer is it's because I'm empowering them. So the Second Amendment, for all the people who think the Second Amendment, it was about sport shooting or hunting as a right, it had nothing to do with that. And it still doesn't, because what it has to do with is a balance of power. If you have an armed citizen or an armed society, the government that's overstepping always, by the way, it's always doing that, right? That's just how power. Yeah, it's that's what this idea of checks and balances derive from. We have to constantly check ourselves internally. I run a small business with 40 people, and we're constantly doing that. So when you take a government that's bloated, fat, and happy and out of control, what's the balance of powers so we don't become a next Afghanistan or a next Libya or next Niger, Africa? Well, it's you go, hey, if the citizens of this country are armed, the government has no chance at waging a war against its people. So that's a balance of powers. Sporting, hunting, that's all extra shit. So when a government goes, we're going to cut all of your rights and you can't have any guns, how much control do they really have? They have absolute control. And that scares the shit out of me. So when I teach preparedness for countries like yours, I think, man, what's the best tactic here? Well, it's cutting all dependency on the institution and the government and to become more self-reliant so you don't have to deal with them at all. I mean, to me, I think that's how great countries manifest themselves in capitalism to be thriving economies and prosperous. But I also think that the opposite of that is what's happening now. Complete dependence, where you can't get off the teat of the government. And if you do, you feel like you're going to die. That's a scary place to be for society.
Not just for society. Let's look at this in a bigger picture. Let's look at this from, say, our people's side. And I say our people because, and I don't mean Asian because I'm white, but I'm talking about military. Let's look at it from that stance. You get all of these people that want to leave the military or are injured in the military or are not given the proper tools to handle the situation. They're put on drugs, which, if you ever get to listen to that episode, I suggest you listen to it. But you get put on drugs, you get stuck in this mud, and then they go, well, you're dependent on us now. And then in order for us to give you what you need, every single year you need to prove that either if you've lost a limb, it hasn't grown back, or that you are still struggling, or that you're still a stick in the mud, because they've built you up to be on the dependency of the government and Veterans Affairs and how that system works. And you're seeing that after COVID. You're seeing that with individuals who were given the CERB, which is, people are given money to stay home because it's safer. Nobody wants to come back to work. Nobody wants to work that hard. Hey, the government will just give me money. Sweet. And then they'll tax you 56% later, but not the people that are actually getting the money. They're going to tax the people who have paid the money into the taxpayers to give the dependency. And then they're going to tax you again. And then these people are just going to stay on the dependency program because they think it's easier and it's safer to do, because the government would never, ever harm them. They would never, ever do anything or take anything away from you that would be, make you not feel good. They have your best at heart. Don't you know that? It's like when you take weapons away, you're taking the ability to fight back. And I'm not saying from a violent standpoint, but it's the idea of freedom. It's the idea that we can say things and not be sued, but we can. Canada doesn't have the freedom of speech. We can't. I cannot tell you the amount of Canadians I know that live in the United States because they're either comedians or they do YouTube or they do whatever, but they can be sued and put in prison in my country for saying something to someone that they deemed a joke. And so there's this idea of dependency and the way that we allow people to control our life and how it functions. So I always enjoy perspectives like yours, because the way you come at it, especially for Canada, I mean, and our listeners right now are probably 80% American up to this point, but for the people we have in Canada that do listen, a lot of them are going to say, well, he promotes guns. It's like, no, you just explained. It's not about guns. It's not about how quick you can shoot a Glock. It's not about how quick you can get to your weapon. It's none of that. It's about the situational awareness that literally every human being I know lacks. And that is a struggle to watch. And so it's nice to see that you're working on those things. And I think you would be more welcomed in Canada if people, I'm sure you're very welcome, but I think there would be this idea, because you're not like, I want to promote gun violence or gun safety. It's like, I just want to promote safety and situational awareness in general. It shouldn't be that difficult. It should just be a common sense thing. I'm going to flip back to a couple things if you're okay with this. Okay. So you decided special forces, Green Beret, not good enough. Want to go harder and do more than that. And then you decided at that point, sorry, that's Kenny. He's our Cane Corso in the office. I don't know if you heard that, but he just went ape shit because someone walked in the building. He's a good guard dog. He's a good boy. So what I want to go back to was you decided Green Beret not good enough, need to be better, need to do more. CIA walks in. Can you explain to me what the CIA really is? Because the listeners that I have are going to be going, I've seen Homeland. I know what the CIA is. And you're like, no, motherfucker, you don't know what the CIA is. Let me educate you.
Yeah.
So Mike.
Yeah. So the intelligence community, which is over 17 organizations, including the NSA, the NRO, the DIA, the list goes on, is a intelligence collection organization. Its entire job is to listen to the world and create policy, which typically in my expertise in operations drives our operations priorities. So when I look at it from an operational standpoint, I wanted to be involved because I knew that the Central Intelligence Agency has the best and the brightest, but also some of the best latitude for a guy like me that's honed his skill sets to be able to play on this world stage and do operational things. That's why I personally wanted to join the Central Intelligence Agency. And it is that. I would tell you, like, it's an organization of the smartest human beings I've ever met in my life. Super intelligent people. The missing component is the CIA is recruiting the smartest. And often the smartest aren't the most aptitude
Look at
driven
your face
tactical people.
while you say that. If you're not okay, if you're just listening to this episode, you're
Yeah.
making a huge mistake. You need to go watch his face as he gently and carefully watches his word
Yeah.
placement because he knows there's shit he can't say.
Yes. I babysat case officers for a living in the CIA.
Ah,
That's
there it is.
I mean, that's a general way of putting it. But I never worked with anybody. Look, the agency and our role would never allow any of these good people to operate without being competent in tactics and competent in situational awareness and all these things that are preparedness
Right.
centric. So I will say the best job I've had, the service is not a job for me. It was a duty. The best job I've ever had was working in the CIA. It was the best job I've ever had.
How many years did you do with just the CIA?
3, just with the
Okay.
agent 3.
Just with that agency. Okay. And when you went to them, did you deploy with them? Or am I blowing
Yes.
out book stuff here?
Yeah. I did. I went over the world with them. I was in Yemen and Pakistan and Iraq and Libya. Like I was all over the place with them.
So in a 3-year time frame, the reason I'm trying to word it that way is because people think that when you deploy as a military, you go for, regular military go for 6, 9, 12 months, but special ops, they go in and out. And then CIA, they're like, you guys are in and out, or you're in country, you're out of country, you're moving around. So this idea that you did 3 years with the CIA is like a lifetime of traveling alone.
Yeah. I was a singleton for sure. And when I'm overseas, even when I was back, I was actually in the reserve component of the military as a sergeant major. So I was in charge as a sergeant major of a special operations unit. And then I was an agency guy. So when I come back, I'd have to put on my sergeant major beret and then go do sergeant major things. And so that typically involved the deployment. And then I come back and then deploy with the agency. So my life, let's just say I didn't have any good standing long-term relationships that were developed.
I was going to say, we're not married and have children, right? There's no children.
Yeah, my life was not set up to have a family, and it's because operationally I was just so damn busy.
But I mean, that takes a lot of sacrifice in your life though, too. I mean, I don't know what you wanted as as a human being and what your goals were personally, but I know that takes a toll. And I know most of this, soft guys, I know 95% divorce rate. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, it's so high. Yeah.
it's
You
so
live
high.
insulated. Well, you live in this, what you do is you live in this fake reality, this bubble that feels like normal because it has a restaurant or a food place. It has an evening hour. It has a social gathering. It has a gym and a routine. But that bubble that exists in Pakistan is not your actual life because that is temporary. So a lot of people fall in love with the idea of living that bubble wherever it may be and temporarily bound to something and not fully committed to something. So they're afraid of the commitment long term because they don't know if they can handle it. And I know a lot of guys who live that way. And that's just not, look, that was my style, but it's just not my style anymore. I want a little bit of permanence, but I still get anxious. I'm like, dude, I need to go. I need to leave. I need to deploy. It's like, Mike, there is no more deployments. I'm like, well, I'll make up one. I'll do one.
I will find one and go there because I can do those things because I know all the people that run them.
I'm going back to Iraq this year. Later this year, I'm going to Iraq.
Why? But why? For why?
I'm doing a documentary on the Iraqi.
Okay. Just drop that on me. Yeah. That's so you're just doing a documentary. It's fine.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be awesome.
Bro, who's doing a documentary with you in Iraq? Is this like, are you bringing like people with you, or is this like civilian? Like, I want to film this.
Yeah, so it's me and a couple of my film guys, but we're going to talk to the general of special operations for Iraq, a couple, operator level guys, and then we're going to talk to the Iraqis who fought side by side with us. And people forget when we abandoned them in 2014, they had to fight ISIS on their own. We left.
Yeah. It's happening again.
Oh, I know. I just saw yesterday at the gym, I saw on the TV 24 or a couple dozen commandos were confronted by the Taliban. They all surrendered because they're like, hey,
Immediately.
we have to agree. They lined them up and executed them all. It's like, what? Did you not? It's like General Miller and every single officer and sergeant major underneath you could have told you at the lowest level that that was going to happen. But we're okay with that? Insane.
You think it takes a sergeant major? I could have fucking told you this was going to happen. And I left in 2009. I said, when this happens, when we leave, the people that are our interpreters, these people that have just given us their house for the night, these people that hit a radio for us or kind of did the silent point to the bad guy and risked their life, they're fucking gonna have their heads cut off. And the women are going to be enslaved and raped and murdered. And I don't care if people find this uncomfortable. Guess what? Welcome to fucking reality. You can love who you have in power, but what they just did and how they just did it was the most disgusting, despicable, just disrespectful to humanity's way of handling the pullout of a war. And I saw an article on the CBC, which is one of our national news, and it crushed me a lot. I won't even lie to you. It hit me in my newfound feels, and I was not pumped about it. It was about Canadians in the Panjwai district and how we just got rocked there for the extent of Afghanistan. Them and the British, they just that Helmand and Panjwai. I mean, we lost a lot of Americans there too, but like in particular, a lot of fighting happened in the Panjwai district. It just did, and that's where I got fucked up. So I saw this article that's just saying, they interviewed all these Canadians, and every single response of the vet was like, what the fuck did we just do this for? What did we just spend 07 to now doing, sacrificing, walking on IEDs, and then traumatizing our youth to just now pull out and then find out that Terps can't even get out? A friend of mine is trying to get his interpreter out. The guy's got like cash in hand. They closed the embassy the next day. Him and his wife are being hunted.
Wow.
Like this is horrific shit that we're seeing and happening, and we're just allowing it to, and it's perfectly fine. The war is over. Don't you know? It's fine. There's no more casualties. We don't need to learn about it.
Yeah.
And then I was listening recently. I want to talk to you about this. The new thing that I'm hearing, and I only hear what I hear because I'm up here. What is this new? And maybe you know about this, maybe you don't, but you're kind of the guy, I feel like. What is this new threat of American, what is it, domestic terrorism that's being thrown? Can someone explain your fucking face again? It's your face. How did you work in the CIA? Because you almost, you cracked so quick. You cracked so fast. Can you explain to me what the fuck is going on right now?
Yeah. So, here's take it back maybe 6 months ago. And 6 months ago, pre-election, I was a racist. I was a white supremacist. I was a right-wing extremest. And so
you're Asian.
I know. I'm like, dude, I'm Asian from the waist down. I'm half Asian at least.
Asian. Did I find out that you used to think you were Japanese, but now you found out you're Korean? Was that a rumor?
Well, I thought I was all Korean, like half Korean. I'm half Norwegian. And then a piece of Japanese was in me. And I was like, that's weird. And my mom is not fond of Japanese because the whole, raping and pillaging of Koreans. And so I was like,
I mean, nothing big.
Yeah, I was like 13%. That's unacceptable. And then as time lingered forward, all of a sudden all the Japanese is gone. And I was like, well, how the hell did that happen? And it's because they refined the picture with more people. And I'm glad that worked out though.
All right.
So yeah. So I was all of these things because I was standing up on social media and saying, look, I want to prepare civilians. And I started this thing called American Contingency, which the whole entire idea of American Contingency was most citizens in their own community are not neighbors, friends, or communal with anybody in their neighborhood. They look at their neighbor and they're checking the mail and they're like, who the hell is that? It's like your neighbor. That's your neighbor. They're annoyed. It's like they go into your apartment complex and you scowl at people coming out of their doors and you have 1,000 people above you and next to you, and you don't know who anybody is. So I said, this was the time period that it was accepted that BLM or any movement that turned violent was acceptable. And I come from a place in the military where I operated in the gray, but I still had a moral boundary and compass because I understood law and order. Like, law shouldn't be changed. And if you want to change it, do the hard work and legislation to change it. But don't just start breaking laws, burning buildings. I mean, half the businesses in Atlanta, Georgia are Black owned, but BLM was burning them to the ground with Antifa. And it's like, why are you doing that to our own community? I don't even have a problem with that, because personally, do whatever you got to do. If the governor, if the law enforcement aren't willing to do that, that's your personal communal problem. I think it's a societal problem, but that's on you. The problem I have is when that migrated into urban and rural areas where law-abiding citizens in their homes were getting attacked. Like, people were going into people's driveways, kicking in their doors, telling them to come out because they were like privileged and white and all this stuff. And I'm like,
that white guy had like I loved it. Did you see, I know I'm worse at interrupting, I'm hearing myself, but did you see the guy, like the white guy standing on his lawn with like a gun, like some super rich guy, and then the wife was standing there and she was just like casually standing like this, like, and I was like,
Mr. and Mrs. Smith. That's what that was.
It's like the smallest, I know, but it was the cutest little handgun. But she was just like, motherfucker, step. One more step. I would love to pop this bitch off. Like, it was hilarious.
See, that's the thing. Like, look, I ask people all the time, what would you do if your children were inside of your home and a mob of people came up on your front doorstep and saying, we're going to strip you out because you're whatever the reason is, and you felt at risk for your life? Well, you're going to defend yourself. Well, I don't want people fending for themselves. I want communities banding together and fending for each other. So I started that. A leftist extremist organization that has a media front did a complete like 20-page spread on me personally, which I was flattered.
Then honored, Mike.
I was so honored because it had like pictures of me and saying,
looking all slick and like all fly.
Like a citizen. I was training citizens to get ready for war, and it's like soccer. Like, I'm literally, there's a picture of me with like kids and moms, and they're like, they're training these guys to go to war. I'm like, oh my God, we're not jihadists. It's insane. So USA Today published that. Not even understand the context, because we almost sued USA Today, but they published it and lumped us in with all of these actual pretty extreme groups. And when that happened, we lost our Shopify, which is Canadian based. We lost our Shopify, which we were doing up to that point like 10K of revenue a day. They completely destroyed our business. They're like, you're done.
They just shut it down without. And what did they say to that? What did Shopify say to that?
No reason. They said we don't have to provide a reason.
I'd go after them publicly.
I did publicly for a period of time, but I got lawyers, and we actually had a lot of our friends migrate to an American commerce site called Big Commerce. Right. I highly recommend, because there's no suppression. Yes. We lost our bank account. We lost a Facebook, Instagram. They all deleted us because of that wrongfully pointed leftist extremist advertisement, which was a story fronted as a story. So there's a thing that the left has always been concerned with. The Democratic Party under Bill Clinton, remember Ruby Ridge, Waco, all of these things. Like, what justification would you have for burning an entire church full of children to the ground because of breaking laws around guns? There is no justification on the planet, because children can't defend for themselves. And there's pictures of FBI agents who, by the way, is the elected attorney general for America, as an FBI HRT agent, standing in front of a field of ashes of children. And I'm like, what the fuck are we doing? And so I'm not an extreme human being, but you want to see Mike Glover and a whole bunch of elite operators come unhinged. And when I mean
You're
unhinged,
about to.
not like pick up guns, because I'm too tactical to pick up guns.
I don't need to pick up a gun.
I'll pick up a country full of Americans who aren't going to take that. So when that started happening, I'm like, what is going on here? And I realized at a community level, I had to start looking at legislation. I had to start looking at community leaders. I had to make people stand up as community leaders in their own backyard to go, look, there's phases to this operation. It's not go to war. It's get involved in politics, get involved in legislation, and stand up for our communities. Stand for law and order, get sheriffs to back us, get law enforcement officers to stand their ground and go, this is unacceptable. And that's what we did. Right. Is it a thing? Yeah, I'm sure it's a thing. Like, just like leftist extremists is a thing, but is it a pandemic? Is it systemic? I don't think so. I think it's a fabrication, like many things, of right-wing and left-wing politicians who have a vested interest in boosting their headlines and popularity so they can stay in power. That's what it is.
I don't know how when did this happen for you, when US Today and all of them, when did all this happen?
So this was, it was coming to fruition in November of last year. And then right after the election, it all petered out, tracer burnout. It faded away. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, Mike's a normal, good dude. My Facebook got released. My Instagram got released. And I'm like, interesting. Election cycle. What they didn't want is my influence, because I had a small segment of influence. They're like,
Mike, you had influence.
Shut them down. Like they did almost everybody that I know in this same boat.
How do you feel about that? Because you come from an area, for lack of a better example, of people that make things disappear and make things appear and make things show up in new places. You do that. How does that feel though? Because you've spent your life protecting our nation, and I say our nation, we're attached to you. You were above the crack house. We know it. We're now the crack house. So welcome. We're on the same team. So, you've spent your life literally putting it on the line for these people and other cultures that you have no rhyme or reason needing to even go over and fuck with. You literally did. And then you were attacked by your own people. I'm sorry, but that would have unhinged as like lightly of how that would have affected me.
Yeah. It was disappointing. And look, I understand one, big business is typically at the biggest corporations and hedge funds and portfolios is tethered to the world. It's not just tethered to the US. So there's so many other interests here, right? Shopify, for example, the founder of Shopify is a Russian. And
what?
He's a Russian. And he's
the fuck? Nobody's checking into this?
Yeah,
he's on Shopify.
He is a Russian. So if you think about the data and what we're doing, look, here's something.
Stop it right now.
Yeah,
I'm getting paranoid.
So a lot of people stand on their favorite brands like Solomon, like Arc'teryx, all owned by the Chinese. Arc'teryx is owned by the Chinese.
Shut up. They just won a CAFA Canadian Art and Fashion Award this year. Shut your mouth.
Yeah. They're
damn it.
Operationally, they're all over the world, including Canada, but they're owned by the Chinese. And so when you see these interests and these spider web networks, if Russia or China says this is going to be what we're going to do, if at the tactical level you have an American at the tactical level, but he's told that this is going to take place and happen and suppress whatever, it is what it is. So instead of combating that, because I'm like, let's sue Shopify. And my lawyer's like, you want to spend hundreds of thousands and years tied up in litigation and not
all of that money do you want to just like Penguin House to write your checks to your lawyer?
Exactly. And I was like, let's not do that. But let's do what good special operations or good military people do. Let's flank and maneuver the enemy. Mm-hmm. Let's circumnavigate obstacles. And let's set up a new support by fire position and move forward with ourselves with more security. So it actually forced me to be more resilient by diversifying. So
Right.
I'm thankful for that, all that bullshit, because one, I was able to control, alt delete all the shitheads out of our social media lives. I was able to see who was a partner, who was an affiliate, and who was a foe. And then I was able to piggyback my infrastructure on something that's right now invincible. That's not going to be fucked with.
Right.
So yeah, I'm happy for it.
So so what's the plan now for you? Because if you're looking at, you've moved, you've diversified, you've done these things, and you've interchanged them very successfully, and really, not gonna lie to you. I mean, obviously we know why they did it to you. You had influence over people who could vote the opposite direction of what they wanted them to vote. So I can understand that. But what is it like now? Like, what are you dealing with now? Because you have an Instagram that has 225,000 followers. Instagram is, we know who that's owned by. You still have a Facebook. You do your business this way. You reach out to people this way. That's how you and I connected. I mean, what happens if they decide to shut it down again?
Yeah, that's a good question. Look, I am I use the social media platforms as best as I can because it's an advantage for business. But
It
I
is.
never fell into the idea that I was going to narrowly focus and potentially compromise my business by depending on one subset or source. So
Okay.
let me give you an example. YouTube is actually very good at First Amendment rights. They're good at constitutional rights. Yeah, they'll demonetize you because they don't
Mhm.
want advertisers to see that there's ads available with gun type content, but there's a line. I've
Or
actually,
just jewelry with bullets.
yeah, anything that's like that, they could demonetize you. But what I've seen on
Mhm.
on YouTube, I have, our company YouTube has 350,000 subscribers and still growing. My
Jesus.
personal has 130,000 subscribers and still growing. And yeah, maybe they can suppress us in the algorithm, but there's so much data and so many people on YouTube, it's available. Let's say all that shit goes away. Dude, I'm going to Black Rifle Coffee not this Tuesday, but next Tuesday. I'm going to Black Rifle Coffee in Dallas, Texas, and doing an in-person seminar for hundreds of people. And this
Well
weekend,
done.
in my own shop, I'm going to be able to advertise through our newsletter, through our website. I'm doing a Go
Right.
Rigs and Coffee where we sip coffee, we break bread, which is typically donuts, and hang out and talk shit. But we have an educational platform. They can go through our store. I am a grassroots kind of guy. If all of that shit went away, I would get off my ass and go to every city and state in America and start talking about preparedness. It's not beyond me. The last hope is this thing called podcast. I've been podcasting for 6 years. I started the Fieldcraft Survival podcast, like
Yeah.
literally in my pajamas, like my boxer briefs, talking into my damn cell phone on
Right.
audio voice memos. And
Yeah.
yeah, now we have a top rated podcast in the top 50 on iTunes in both
Good job,
our
buddy.
category in sports, which is Fieldcraft, and my Mike Force podcast as well. And it's a grind, but we can navigate these things. I will I will guesstimate and make a prediction that in the next decade, it would probably take that long, all of these major players and the platforms will either get virus hacked and attacked and shut down in a viral war of hackers versus the system. They will be shut down by the government because they will need to be regulated because they're monopolizing the world,
Yep.
or they will just get shut down and burned to the ground. And that's in the next decade. So everybody who's dependent needs to start diversifying because it's bound to happen.
Well, and if you're hearing that, you're not hearing that from like some conspiracy theorist. You're hearing this from Mike Clever, who worked for the C fucking IA. So when you hear things like that come from you, it should shake people in their boots, but it should also leave a little hope, I think, because then maybe this idea of this overtaking, overreaching social media type of platforms will finally, I want to say fall, but should fall. Because I mean, we're seeing Facebook, was there not a genocide because of Facebook in, help me here. I want to say like Myanmar. Where was it?
It was Myanmar. Yeah, it was in
Myanmar.
Myanmar.
Was it Myanmar? Okay. So sorry for my mispronunciation, but that there was a whole genocide due to Facebook. How is that not the conversation here?
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to, you know what, it's like COVID, right? Everybody said COVID's going to destroy society. But what it did is it hit the reset button in a lot of people's primal minds to realize maybe it's not so bad working from home. Maybe it's not so bad spending time with family. Maybe it's
Cool.
not so, yeah, maybe it's not so bad spending quality time with my loved ones and building a more self-reliant situation. You know, I'm pointing to the window
Right.
because I have goats, I have horses, I have chickens.
You have
Because,
goats?
oh
I have
yeah,
goats.
yeah, I don't know if they're
I
out
love
here.
goats.
Yeah.
Well, when you come back on again, I I want goat in my video because I need goats. I fucking love goats. Why are little goats like they just bring a smile to anyone's face at any point?
They're just
Tangent.
they're the great thing about goats is they don't have anger in them. It's not an emotion or it's not a primal instinct. They're just happy
Right.
fucking people. Goats.
They're 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 happy people. I agree. They're hilarious. I drive by. There's literally like a little farm. I drive by and I drop my son up at preschool, and I'm like, "There's the goats, buddy." He's like, "Those are Farmer Sherry's goats, mummy. They're not your goats." And I was like, "Well, I mean, we wave to them every day. They're not yours, mummy." And I was like, "Oh, can we get some goats?"
Okay,
No, mummy. The goats, mummy, they jump on everything. They chew everything. They'll eat the garden. I was like, fine, we won't get goats, but I'm
that's
totally
true. They
getting
will do that.
fucking goat.
They do it to me
I
every day.
know. Yeah, right. And well, they should. I mean, it'd be hilarious. I'd witness that and be, I mean, that's a YouTube video that needs to go viral, first off. But that's what I mean is there's this idea of preparing our lives a little bit differently right now. And that's been an incredible thing. If anything, COVID has it's crushed the Canadian economy pathetically. It's literally caused a higher epidemic in suicides and overdose rate in British Columbia in cross Canada. It's disgusting. I know a 7-year-old that's been suicidal. Like, I'm not kidding when I say this has been bad, 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 bad. And it's been like that in the States, but at least you guys have opened it up and you've seen the bigger picture. My
Yeah.
hope is that from this, when people listen to you, and I'm hoping that they end up going over to, the Mike Force podcast and the Fieldcraft, because I think you're doing the similar thing that I am trying to do in a different way. I'm not trained like you are. I can't teach the way that you can teach, but there is a platform and an opportunity for these podcasts for people to listen. And this is something they've lacked. It's been CNN or Fox. That's it. It's been Global BC or CBC. That's it. There has been no, let's have a conversation with people on a regular basis that are from different sides, and let's put our heads together and figure out why this shit has happened in the first place and why our society has allowed it to happen in the first place. So I feel a lot of commonality with you, and there's some stuff. Remind me, I want to talk to you about after because you just made me think about some things. But the way that you guys are running your company and how you're functioning, you said you have 40 people. Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have 40 people. Are you guys kind of doing this like attack and conquer and go across the country all at one time? Or is this that all of you are at each event and at each specific thing? Like what's this look like, the way that your company is you're made up here?
Yeah. So, I break it down into 3 tiers. We have fieldcraftsurvival.com, which we host training all over the US in about 6 states per weekend. So every
Wow.
weekend you'll have us in 6 different states teaching a myriad of courses, including a combative, situational awareness, first aid and trauma, CPR, survival, primitive survival, austere survival, outdoor wilderness survival, um, tactics, pistol, carbine, long gun, and the list goes on. We even run special operations prep courses for young men and women who want to serve in the military. So that
Brilliant.
happens every weekend. There's probably 100 courses listed on my website right now on fieldcraftsurvival.com. Mostly, we have a training component, but training only scales with people. So more
Right.
people, more problems, but we also will never compromise the subject matter expert. We want to have the best quality instructors on the planet. So we have
Mhm.
products as well. So we do mobility bags, first aid kits, survival kits, loadout bags, everything from, beef jerky and the stuff that sits on your shelf that has a 10-year shelf life, all the way to, first aid kits and survival kits. That's a part of fieldcraftsurvival.com. wetheprepared.com is a virtual online resource.
Oh,
So
okay.
because we want to start progressive learning, like I want you to get into this funnel and go, man, I like this idea of it. Where's the start point? And it's this. But then I want you to have a curriculum like similar to academic curriculums through learning management systems and LMS, that you take these courses online. But I also want you to have an experience. So I'll ship you a tourniquet. You'll do a stop the bleed
Oh,
class
wow.
online. You'll upload the video. You'll get confirmed by an instructor. You'll get a certificate in the mail. That's what wetheprepared.com is. And the last component to this is members.americancontingency.com or just americancontingency.com. The idea is you're into preparedness, but what else you got? Well, if you're into preparedness and you're part of this alumni that is Fieldcraft Survival or We the Prepared, you could funnel in and find a group near you. We have hundreds of groups that are all over the country that are preparedness minded, that go out and train together, that break bread together, that do community events and helping their own community together.
Community.
And I think that's, for me, one of the most impactful parts of my business. But the podcast, the YouTube, all the content we're doing on top of everything else is all tiered into these three, I'll call them action arms of the company.
Okay. So what is it like for you now? Because you do have all of these incredible things going on. You do have a book that's coming out next year. You do have you have two podcasts. Sorry if I totally didn't even catch on to the other one because I'm an idiot, but it's fine. But I want to know a couple things, and this is where you get uncomfortable. What's it been like transitioning with the mental health aspect of the things that you go through? Because we talk very openly here about a lot of what it's like when you get out, when you're serving, what it can be like, and some of the tools that you've used to improve rather than just keep yourself busy. But what have you actually done? Have you struggled with any of your situational, operational, those types of things?
Yeah, and so there's two stark contrasts in service, right? There's a, let me just define it this way because this is how best my brain wraps it. Like some people go to the military and they serve and they have no expectations of service because they're getting their college degree, they're getting the experience. And then when something happens traumatically, there's an expectation that was going to happen. They didn't know. There's guys who served even prior to 9/11 or even in 9/11 who went, why am I in Afghanistan in a convoy driving in a truck transporting goods? I didn't sign up for this. So that mindset is a path that leads to potentially traumatic issues that are going to affect you long term versus my background, Andy Stump's background, even Jocko's background, where intentionally I signed up and I'm like, I'm going to war. And not only am I going to war, I want to go to war. I want to fight. I want to defend my country. I want to defend the men I'm with. And I volunteer for, selection, for free fall school, for all these things because I want to get more involved. So the expectation there is people are going to die. People are going to get hurt. People are going to be traumatized. So if you said to me like, hey, Mike, how much trauma did you experience in the military? I could probably make the argument that my entire experience was trauma. Jumping out of an airplane at 25,000 feet with a sniper rifle and a 120-pound rucksack strapped to your groin is not, it's not sexy. It's traumatic. So what happened to me in my transition, and often from my background, it's not that there's an expectation that somehow we're going to be able to transition. It's the conditional transition that's the most difficult. We have a routine. We have a life we lived. It's the equivalent of taking a military working dog who bites terrorists' asses for a living, who destroys and bites and detects, and then who's been blown up and shot at, or maybe even shot and blown up, and then put them in your home and say, hey, get on the couch. Bring the kids in here. Let's pet this dog. This is the new pet.
Let's see how this goes.
Let's see how this works out. So when I came out of the military, just like most, I had this idea with, at the time, my ex-girlfriend, who was like, this is awesome. My boyfriend's this sexy, like gunfighter, like tactical guy. But on the surface, it's like, oh, I'm cool. I'm hanging out with this guy who's got this cool story. And then when I go home, it's like, oh shit, this dude's like, he's whacked out of his mind, right? So
Like, no.
no, I'm cool. Everything's cool. And with my experience with the Veteran Affairs Service, when I said I had a hard time sleeping, it wasn't because of nightmares. Like I don't mean to say it this way, but I have no problem in killing bad people. No problem at all. I did it a lot.
I
and it was
totally
awesome.
agree with you. I agree with you. It's when you see your people. That's a different thing.
Well, even that affected me, right? I have a bracelet probably with 14 friends that are written on it, that I lost about 14 like actual people that I knew their wives, their buddies of mine. And that's impactful too. But the thing that I've realized in that life is what else in their lives, how would they have wanted to go out? And so like I take like Ben Bittner, right? Ben's one of my great friends who was killed in Afghanistan and outside of Kandahar. Like Ben Bittner was one of the most in the moment, like in the community, respected as one of the baddest ass dudes on the planet. How would Ben Bittner wanted to die? Yeah, sure. He wanted to see his kid grow up, his boys. He wanted to see that his life evolve and transition into different things. But if he gave him a choice, you're going to die in a hospice after the fact, or are you going to die in combat where you thrive? Where's it going to be?
Yep.
And Ben Bittner would have told you. I've had those conversations with him. He would have wanted to die in war. I actually thought I was going to die in war, but I didn't. And so now I'm like, well, fuck, here we go, picking up the pieces. VA gave me trazodone and Ambien because they said that was the solution for sleep. What I've realized after the fact, CBD, CBN, and THC is the solution for me. Indica specifically is the solution for me for sleep. So you have a whole conditioned lapse that I had to re-navigate. But I was a government contractor for the CIA. I started my own purpose with my own mission, which is Fieldcraft. So for me, it wasn't that difficult because I had that purpose. And most often, that's not the case for others.
And it's about finding that purpose too, right? So it took me 6 years to find it, but once I found it, it was like it was a roadmap now, right? There's a plan in place, things to implement and goals and things to hit. But before you have those things, that's where you kind of see that lapse happen, and the pharmaceutical drugs and all the doctors kind of come in and go, take this, take this, take this, take this. And then they wonder why they're dependent on the system. When you started using cannabis, how did you feel about that? Because you don't strike me, I mean, you don't strike me as like the guy that's like, I'll smoke a joint before bed or take oil or edibles or whatever. You just don't seem that way. But that being said, knowing how you have to function on a daily basis, be fully with it and not fogged out of your mind and get out of bed and be able to run a weapon and do those things. Was that a choice that you chose to switch medications, or are you still on those medications? What's the deal? What are we looking at?
Yeah, so I am super conservative and I don't like drugs. I've seen it destroy family members and like all kinds of horrible stuff, like most often drugs do. But what I didn't realize is I was super uneducated about marijuana specifically. And yeah, there are some adverse effects for marijuana, including psychotic episodes for people who are predisposed to those kind of issues, abuse of the drug, which makes you a lazy turd, which nobody's ever overdosed from marijuana.
Depends on the strain. Listen, I function morning, noon, and night because of this shit. You just gotta get your strains right, brother.
Yeah. So I grew up with a whole bunch of lazy buttholes who were just using jar weed.
So you had high school kind of like you went around marijuana in that sense.
This is before high times and the analysis of strains was even a thing, right? And people were just getting blazed. And I see them being lazy and not wanting to do much except for crush snacks, which is funny. But I mean, there's a whole thing behind it. So I'm like, there's no way I'm doing this. Well, when I got out of the military in the transitional phase, I started getting all these pharmaceuticals. And half of pharmaceuticals, by the way, are derived from plant-based whatever, right? There's
Right.
a plant origin story there, but half of them are based on synthetic. And when you take synthetic and you mix it with alcohol and all these other things that people do, in fact, including myself at one point, it starts to destroy your life. So I was open-minded because I had to be. I said, like, hey, what else is there? And I had a buddy at the time who was a former special operations guy, and he said, hey man, hit this pin, it will make you relax. And I used to get anxious all the time, and I'm like, yeah, like my endocrine system is shot. When you jump out of airplanes and kill bad guys for a living, you can't regulate your own damn hormones, right?
Calm yourself. You
Yeah,
just
you can't.
can't.
Like I talked to Eddie Penny about this, who's a former Damnet guy and former SEAL Team 6 guy, and he had the same experience where we're on an airplane and we have a panic attack. And why would I have a panic attack on an airplane? I jump out of them for a living, but I had to, because it just, whether it was the smell of fuel or the thought or just my system activating because it's supposed to be
Triggered you.
primally activated and prepared, it happened. So I tried CBD first, and then I tried a couple of different strains of indica, and it helped me. It helped me so much. Like I own a company. I own a CBD CBN company called the Wolf 21. Yeah.
Oh, we're going to chat about this after.
Yeah, I started the company. Why? Because I looked at this. It was powered by a company called Slumber, and they're a great company. And I went, I love this so much because I take it every night and I don't feel the after effects, and I could operate on a range and do high risk kind of things. And I'm getting the best sleep of my life without feeling like shit. And so I started doing research on it. I talked to a whole bunch of scientists because I wanted to know the science behind it before I pushed it.
Right.
And I started my own company.
Bro, that's fucking, I'm so happy you, oh, goddamn. I have such a hard time when people are like, I would never try cannabis. Cause I'm like, you don't understand the amount of people's lives it has saved.
Game
Just
changer.
pain management for all of us that have had a bajillion surgeries and are broken and our knees hurt, like we're 76 years old.
Yeah.
Like it, you're jumping, like you say, you're jumping out with a pack that weighed 20 pounds more than me.
Yeah.
So, taking that compression on your spine and on your back and your spinal column radiating right up into your fucking brain, and the way your knees take the hits. It's just, there's so many more solutions to the problems. And I love seeing people that are like you, who are leaders in their community, who are leaders in their X community. These are people that you're influencing, but you're doing it and you're being smart about it with a positive, healthy alternative than just take these pills, you'll feel better. Because you and I both know they don't work that great for sleep. They just make you foggy and gross the next day. You can't function with a weapon super safely. I found that out when in country. Super fun. You can't. Oh yeah, buddy. You really need to listen to that Jocko episode, bro. There's some stuff. But there are ways to help our communities and our societies, and they're maybe non-traditional, maybe they're not ideal for most conservative thoughts, but if you're willing to give it a chance and you're willing to look at the bigger picture, we can not only save so many people from themselves, but we can help so many people thrive. And I think that's the big difference. And that's what I really wanted to, why I wanted to bring you on. You're a big deal in your community. And I'm slowly walking into this community as a Canadian female. And I have never had such great conversations before with other SOF members than I have when I started this podcast. The openness and honesty to the way that you guys talk and the willingness to talk about shit that you would think guys like you are like, I'm tough. Like, leave me alone. I would never do anything like that. Nothing's ever wrong with me. It's fine. It's just, it gives me a lot of hope because I'm really, really fucking fed up of seeing our people kill themselves. And I'm really fucking fed up of people saying that they feel alone because all of us, it's chronic, man. I was telling you before the show, Jocko's came out. I've got more people reaching out for help and saying, thank you. I'm not alone. It's like, How could you ever think after this many soldiers have deployed and this many, CIOps and this many things that you're alone?
Yeah,
It's because nobody wants to talk,
100%. Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Um, so I know how hard it is to nail you down. So I'm very grateful for you coming on the show. I'm stoked for humanity's sake because as long as there's people like you that are doing what you're doing, we are going to be just fucking fine.
Oh, that means a lot. Thank you so much. The same with you. I mean, you're creating, especially as a female. Like I'll get a little sexist because
Give me the
look,
sexist is welcome this in my fucking life. Bring it, bro.
yeah, I love it. Well, see, the thing about like a lot of women work for me, and women are, no matter how many people say they're not, innately different than males, than men. And the thing about your perspective lends a different optic, and that's important in our world today because the same kind of optic that's derived potentially from a male or the same origin story, having your story, who's somebody who's been in the military and been there, done that, but also able to curate all these conversations is so needed right now. And more, it's encouraging to women. I know it is, but more of this needs to take place with more women because we need more voices from women to curate their perspective to lend itself to it, because you often have better perspectives and different perspectives than just the same old simple the same. So I appreciate you, and I'm looking forward to seeing
Thanks, man.
your journey grow.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, the company's doing its thing right now, and the book comes out hopefully soon. We got some other cool projects cooking, and so we're gonna have you back on if you'll allow us. We would love to
Always.
talk to you when the book comes out. Um, I'm officially going to be disappointed if I don't get a signed copy in the mail. So already setting you up for failure. We're letting you know.
I got you.
I want you
You're
to
on the
know.
list. You're on the
I'm on the
list.
list. I said this to Andy. I said during the show, I said, bro, you're a little bit TBD right now. I'm like, you're almost in the trust tree with the nest, but like, we'll see by the end of this show. And I feel like, sorry, Andy, but Mike has jumped into the nest and there's not a lot of spots left. So you're going to have to either get your shit together or like, I don't know, I'm going to have to figure it out. So do me a favor, give every one of my listeners every place to find everything about Mike Glover, including his ironing services, whichever
Oh
you
yeah.
prefer.
That company's not launched yet, but it'll be coming out soon. It's
Okay, good, good.
schmediums.com.
Schmied, medium probably do so well.
This is an extra large, and they just don't make them for
Is
big
that what
dudes.
it is?
It
Is
is.
that what it is?
They just don't make
An
it for big
extra,
men.
it's an extra small large that Mike read as an extra large. It's really an extra small when you read the back of the tag. If you turn
Yeah.
around and you see the back of him, it's ripped in the middle. It's fine. Don't worry about
It's
it.
actually a
Don't
belly
worry.
shirt. My belly's exposed from
Yeah,
here
the
down.
crop top. I'm gonna
Yes,
send
it's
you a
crop top.
brass and unity crop top. It's gonna
Yeah.
be great.
But I put my
Then you
pants
can
up
use it.
here. That's what
Well, if you think about it, you need access to your gun, right? So you got to wear the crop tops.
constantly. I could
Fuck,
access my gun here. Yeah, like it's right here.
your cleavage. Dude, I am sending you a crop top and I want a full gun movement in my
Done.
crop top.
Done.
So
I
fucking
would run
tight.
that gun
This is
so
gonna be
fast to
awesome.
that crop top. Um,
So fun.
I
Crop tops.
tactical crop tops.
Crop tops. Oh my God, I'm renaming some product today.
Yeah, so we're all over the internet, right? We have
Okay.
the start point is just Fieldcraft Survival. So Fieldcraft Survival
Got
on
it.
Instagram, Facebook, and the podcast. And then look, wetheprepared.com is the online learning. We've already hosted a few free courses to get you interested in it. It will be built out content-wise throughout the year before the book launches. And then americancontingency.com or members.americancontingency.com to get on board with your groups, finding like-minded people, and it's all about preparedness. So my personal Instagram is where I do the most content. It's mike.a.glover, but you could also find me on YouTube at Mike Glover, and I post videos that are just things that are on my mind or whatever. I don't.
Yeah.
My media team is partitioned for my companies, but for me, it's just me turning my cell phone in a selfie mode and filming it. So it's
Right.
pretty informal, but you might find some value in it.
I think there's value in a lot of things you say, Mike, and I think plenty of people are going to jump over to you and you're going to get inundated. So I apologize in advance because I know what's coming your way from my listeners. So I want to say thank you again. We'll talk to you when the book comes out. And I guess that's it, everybody. So go check everything out, Mike Glover, and we'll see you all next week.